We're going to do Judaism today. We had our Muslim friends here the last 2 weeks and slides the week before that, so hopefully we've got a good basis for this session today. Next week we'll start to go off on a little bit different tangent. We'll go on to Hinduism. So that'll be really interesting. If you can make it to that, that'd be great. And so with that, just sort of prepping up, we have David Guaavich, and he's with the Adad Sharam Temple in Collin County here. And he's been the leader of the Torah study at the temple for the last 7 years. He's past Brotherhood president and been on the board of directors over there. He's a big sports enthusiast from Mississippi State University, played basketball for him. And he's vice president of business development for the power company. David, you make a presentation? Did I miss anything? Please.
Well, I don't know about a presentation, but we'll have an experience. We'll have a conversation. Before we start, I just wanted to say thank you to Mal for bringing me here, and thank you guys for coming this morning. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you guys, not at you. So I don't know what your format is, but I would prefer this to be a kind of a Phil Donahue. For those of you that are as old as I would prefer this to be an interactive thing, if you guys are okay with that. I really don't. I'm not too fond of monologues.
Be careful what you ask for.
That's okay. The time we have is the time we have. I mean, if 90% of it were questions, I'd consider that a very successful engagement. What I'm going to do this morning is I'm going to talk about the things about Judaism that I love, that move me. So this will be coming from here, not so much from here. There will be some from here, depending upon your questions. I don't know how literate you are about Judaism. I guess that's sort of the point this morning. But I do a lot of this sort of thing for my congregation. And before I get started, I just want to say again that it's a real privilege to be here, and I really appreciate you guys coming. What I'm going to do is, the stuff that I put up here is stuff that I hope that you've thought about or that you might be familiar with. It's just kind of a, the DNA. It's kind of the DNA of Judaism. As Mal said, I've been the Torah study leader in my synagogue for a long time, and so what that tells you is that I'm very much in love with this book and what it means, and also that I enjoy a healthy dialogue. So think back to when you were open-minded. Okay? You're in your dorm, we're having a conversation. I don't have a need to attack this in any particular order, although I suppose it might make more sense if we did, but owing to the nature of the free-flowing conversation I'd like to have with you, we'll just take it as it comes, And I'm hoping that this whole conversation will be directed by your questions, but to get to that, let me just give you a very short, basic introduction to Judaism. You guys all know this. I didn't mean this to be condescending, but it's kind of important for a timeline. This is the amount of time that went by for these people, which are obviously pretty important people. This one you don't recognize because this is the Hebrew for Abraham. There are probably 4 prophets or patriarchs whose names God changed in the course of the Torah. And Abraham is one. His name was Avram. And he grew up in a very sophisticated city in a country called Ur. What's ironic about this is his father was an idol maker. So, if you're from Mississippi State, that's kind of like being Jackie Sherrill. What's really cool about the first part of this story is when he was 10 or 11, what happened was God called him. But before God called him, he managed to destroy all the idols in his father's shop. Because he kind of had a, he had a premonition of what was about to happen, I guess. So what I want to tell you about this that's really cool is when he destroyed all the idols in his father's shop, he was sentenced to death. So his father took him to a crematorium. We'll get to this in a minute again with the binding of Isaac, which is one of the great conundrums of all time, right? How could a father kill his own son? But for now, what you need to know is that his father took him to the town hall to put him in a crematorium because of what he'd done. And remember now, at this time, everybody worshipped a zillion idols. Monotheism, this is the whole point that we're leading to. Maybe I should just go there now. Abraham is the creator of monotheism. That's the whole point of it. That's why he's the father of the Jews, because until Abraham said, no. There's one God and only one God. You can worship however many gods you want, but there's only one God. There was no concept at all of monotheism. So what happened was his father took him to be cremated and God saved him. That's the Cliff Notes. I mean, there's a nice story there, but we don't have time for that. So then what happens, which is really cool, of course, is that God calls him and says in Hebrew, Lech Lecha, go and I will send you to a land that your fathers will inherit. So God tells Abraham to leave his family, his country, everything behind on, I guess you would call it blind faith. I'm not a real big proponent of blind faith. In fact, I'm not a big proponent of anything that's not there for himself. I mean, one of the reasons that Abraham is so closely compared to Moses, who is clearly the most important person in the Hebrew Bible, the 5 books of Moses, is because of his extraordinary willingness to do, I mean, think about it, Dee. You're asking a guy to leave his family, his home, his country, for what? For something that's, I mean, it doesn't exist yet, this belief in one God. So it's kind of an amazing thing that happens here, and of course this, this is the precursor for everything later that happens to us. And of course, somewhere in this time frame, God changes his name to Abraham. So when you start talking about Judaism, probably Abraham is the name that comes up first because he's the creator of monotheism and really the father of Judaism in that regard. This we could spend the whole time talking about. I mean, let's talk about it for a minute and see what kinds of questions you guys have. This is what you call the Old Testament. We don't use that nomenclature, obviously, old versus new. No self-respecting Jew would ever call this the Old Testament. It's the book. This is the book. This is the 5 books of Moses. And while the Hebrew Bible encompasses 38 books, which we'll get to in due time, when you include prophets and writings, there are really 38 books. But this, without question, is the backbone of Judaism, and you guys all know this. These are the first 5 books of the Bible.
May I ask a question?
Please do.
Are there other versions of the Torah like King James?
Sure. One of the issues that you have when you leave Torah class is, I mean, it's not a big issue, but to answer your question, the Torah was translated across 5 different languages. That's why Torah class is so fun, because, if you think you know what a word means when it's been translated through 4 languages, you're a little mistaken. There's 10 or 12 different definitions for each of these words. And so that's what makes Torah class so fun, is you have this incredibly vigorous discussion about Esau. You know, there's all kinds of discussions that we have, obviously. And this is on Saturday mornings, by the way, from 9 to 10:30 or so. We have Torah study every Saturday morning in the synagogue.
What are the 5 languages?
Who's asked it? Where are you? So you're the troublemaker. Every other troublemaker, hold your hand up.
Wait a minute,
What is that? Latin, Greek. Somebody got that.
Hebrew?
Thank you. Aramaic, that's 4.
Aramaic?
That's 4.
Greek? This Greek one?
Sure.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
Greek,
Latin,
Latin, Hebrew,
Greek,
Aramaic.
Aramaic.
That's good.
English.
So we got 4 of them.
Yeah.
What?
What did Egyptians speak?
Aramaic.
Aramaic. Yeah. That was the first translation. All right, so here's the thing with this book right here. And by the way, I'll be happy to pass that around if you want to look at it. Genesis, Exodus. Everybody here knows what this is.
Leviticus.
Yes.
Is it correct, is it written in English, or does it go backwards, is the name on backwards, or what? Could you hold it up?
How many questions is it? You didn't raise your hand when I asked the trouble.
Another troublemaker.
The important answer there is in all Hebrew. That's what you need.
Not like this, if the name was synonymous.
Yeah, that, of course it's in English. Otherwise, I can, but you know, that's one. I mean, and let me say something about that real quick, even though it's off topic, because you know, off topic is usually the best. One of the biggest problems that we have in Reform Judaism, everybody understand the basic layout here. There's Reform Judaism, there's Conservative, and there's Orthodox. So whatever questions you have about that, ask them. But that goes from least observant to most. Okay? With the Orthodox, the issue is here and here. The revelation is when God gave Moses either the 10 Commandments or the entire Torah, depending upon what you believe. That's a bit, you know, I could come back and we could just talk about that. I mean, clearly, Revelation is a huge day for the Jews. I mean, God calls Moses to Mount Sinai. Think about this for a second. God calls the Hebrews had been in the desert for 40 years on a journey that would have taken 11 days. 11 days if it was done directly. But God knew that the Hebrews weren't anywhere near ready to enter the land of honey. Canaan. It's actually called Canaan, but it's Israel today. So instead of sending them the most direct route, and the other thing is if he'd have sent them the direct route, the Philistines would have made war and we would have had all kinds of other issues, which we had anyway. But the point is, it took, the 40 years has only to do with the fact that God knew that this generation could not be the generation that inherited the land of Israel because they were slaves for 320 years. And they weren't, you know, I mean, you can't accelerate human relationships that fast. Human relationships can only go at their own pace, as you all should know by now as adults. And so, whether Moses had struck the rock or not, this is another really cool story. You know, Moses was forbidden to enter the land of Israel by God because he struck a rock and to make water come out of it instead of, well, the point is that Moses allowed the people to think that he had caused the water to come out of the rock. And God, that's what upset God so much that he said, you're not going to be allowed to see the land of Canaan. Think about that for a second now. Moses is by far the most important person in the Hebrew Bible. And, you know, no disrespect to Abraham. But Moses, you have to understand, Moses is the CEO here. And his job is, I mean, it's impossible. He's mediating a relationship between two incredibly reluctant parties, God and the Hebrews. The Hebrews are reluctant because all their meals have been taken care of. All their needs have been taken care of by the Egyptians.
Even though they were in bondage.
Because they were in bondage. Because they were in bondage. I mean, they were well fed. And, I mean, clearly there was a problem here because of the way the Hebrews were treated. But they were fed and they were clothed. And spending 40 years wandering around in the desert, I mean, Jews are famous for complaining. And Chinese food, probably. But, I mean, every time you turn around, the Jews are losing faith. This is probably a whole nother Sunday, but, I mean, it's really easy to understand how God got upset so often as he did. I mean, he threatened to wipe out the world 3 times. Did it once. Moses and Abraham talked him out of it. Moses and Abraham are the only 2 people to ever see God face to face. One of the most moving passages in the Torah is where God says to Moses, you cannot see my face. No man can live and see my face, but all my goodness will pass before you if you hide yourself in the cleft of this rock. Very emotional for me. I mean, the second most emotional passage is when Moses comes down the second time. Now, keep in mind, those of you that are my age, and I see a lot of you out there. Mel Brooks. Mel Brooks aside, what happened basically was Moses goes up the mountain the first time for 40 days and 40 nights. Everybody knows that, right? Of course, you know, without food and water, it's a little bit more unclear. But basically what happened, if you're a Reformed Jew, is that God gave Moses the written law, but also the oral law. And we are, one way or the other, we're going to talk about that this morning. And then if I come back, we'll talk about it again. But this is a very... Do I have this? This is a very good thing to understand. Misunderstood by a lot of Jews. Not misunderstood, they're just ignorant. You know, it's a full-time job. It's not that they don't understand. It's just they don't study the book. If you study the book every day or every Saturday or whatever you can do, you know, you find out very quickly that the book has a lot of gaps, okay? There's a lot of things in the Torah that are not even remotely coherent. Not even remote. And not only that, if you want to try to make a timeline out of the Torah, forget it. Forget it. I mean, time is irrelevant. There are things that happen that are, where's the book? I'm feeling very lost. That's a little too far away. There are a lot of things that could not have happened when the book says that they happen. Okay, so understand this. This book right here is about the relationship between God and the Hebrews, period. Don't get lost in the weeds. Don't go looking for details or you're going to be sorely disappointed. And that brings us to the oral law. Keep in mind that at this time, 95% of the people couldn't read. How could you have a written? Of course it was oral. But the point is, there was an unbroken chain for 1,500 years. Okay? God gave it to Moses orally, obviously, and he wrote it down. And what happened was, is because no one could read, it just kept getting told, and, retold and retold and retold by rabbis and all different kinds of people. And this continued until where's my book? This continued until the book was written down. Remember now, the Hebrew Bible, or the 5 books of Moses, wasn't written until 600 years after it happened. And in fact, one of the other interesting conversations that we might have we might not, it might be too specific for you, is there are 4 authors of the Torah, 2 women and 2 men, and they're only known by their initials. And this came out much later. There was all this debate about who wrote it, who did this. So that's another interesting conversation that we can have someday. All right, let's talk about, what do we want to talk about? All right, first question, you get to choose. Do you want to talk about Moses, or do you want to talk about the 613 laws that we're commanded to follow in the Torah? Moses. Okay. Well, when God first approached Moses at the burning bush, you have a moment that I think is worth talking about just for a second. When God first made himself known to Moses at the burning bush, which, by the way, this is courtesy of me. The burning bush is at the foot of Mount Sinai. Think about that for a second. Kind of interesting, would you say, that it started where it did? When God first made himself known to Moses at the burning bush, Moses answered God by saying, "Hineni." And in Hebrew, that means, "Here I am." Now, just think for a second about how much courage it took for him. He's over here, the burning bush is over there, the bush is burning, it's not being destroyed. He's seeing something that's incomprehensible for him, really. And God says, "Moses, Moses," not Charlton Heston. and Moses says, "Hineni, here I am, I'm ready. Whatever you got, bring it on." I don't know about you, but that's pretty impressive to me. That's pretty impressive to me. Moses was willing. At that, I think that's when it started, and Moses was telling God that he was willing to do whatever it was that God needed him to do to have happen what God wanted to have happen, which was to develop a relationship with the Hebrews. Moses was a stutterer. He objected 5 times in the first conversation. You got the wrong guy. I can't even talk. I'm a stutterer. Who knows how Moses developed his stutter? Nobody. This is good. I was kind of counting. What happened was, Moses was raised in the court of the Pharaoh, right? So, one day when he was a little bitty boy, about 3, let's say, he raced up and grabbed the crown off the Pharaoh's head. Really a pet, I'm kidding. That's like scheduling Auburn for your home opener. I mean, that's really, that's a terrible. Well, not this year, but in years gone by, in the Cam years, that was really bad. And what happened was, then one of the courtiers in the Pharaoh's house said, this can't be. We have to kill him or give him a test. And so and I'll be brief here for me at least. they put before him some coals, burning hot coals. And the deal is this is kind of like the witches with the drowning. And they said, you know, if she put the one bowl here, and if the baby goes for the, who knows this, anybody? If the baby goes for the coals, we'll kill him. It's guilty. Which he did. But the angel of God moved his hand to the other side, and so, you know, he swallowed the coal, but he spit it out. And so the point is, that's how he became a stutterer. So when God approached him, he said, "You got to be kidding me. I mean, what am I going to say to the Pharaoh?" And God said, "Well, your brother Aaron, let's have Aaron be the speaker, and I'll tell you what to say." And so that's what happened. Everybody here knows that Aaron is Moses' brother. Moses had a brother named Aaron and a sister named Miriam. Miriam, you would know probably only from, or maybe not at all, but what Miriam did is she sang the song, what's called the Song of the Sea. When the Hebrews were fleeing the Pharaoh, they came to the Red Sea, or the Sea of Reeds, as it's called in Israel. And, you know, it wasn't looking very good. They were kind of, you know, no place else to go. Kind of like Auburn at Alabama. And what happened basically was that, you know, God parted the Red Sea and allowed the Hebrews to go through the sea, and then obviously, as everyone knows, he collapsed the sea. So Miriam sang a song celebrating our, you know, survival. Yeah, that's the word, survival. And God said, "What are you doing? You know, thousands of people just died. Why are you, I mean, these are my people too. Why are you celebrating?" So that's Moses' sister. She goes on to play a bigger role. Yeah.
In the Christian Bible, after burning bush, there's a curious passage where Moses was on the way to hook up with Abram, and God was about to kill him.
Yeah.
Zipporah stepped in.
Right. Look, that's great. Do you have a question, or can I take over now?
What do you want to do?
Yeah, I'm going to. Very nice. Very obvious. The reason that I'm interrupting this nice person in the yellow shirt is because this is a great story that never gets told. What happens here is Moses refuses to circumcise his son because he's so upset about what's happening at this point. Big mistake, right? If you don't circumcise your son on the 8th day and you're Jewish, big problem. So what happens is God strikes Moses down and gives him afflictions, all up and down, all kinds of stuff. And he's gonna die. And Zipporah, as he said, Zipporah steps in and recognizes, hey, you didn't circumcise your son. God has told us that if you're not circumcised on the 8th day, you're not Jewish. It's just that simple. And she saves Moses' life. I mean, just absolutely saves his life. That's great. I appreciate you bringing that up. That's a very undertold story.
Well, was it just like it was a busy week? Came down from the burning bush, and then they had a baby and kind of forgot? Or was it a refusal?
He was upset. I mean, he was upset, and he made a mistake. I mean, that's when we make our mistakes, right? When we're upset a lot of times. I mean, this was a big mistake. And it almost cost him his life, except for his wife, who can relate to that. Raise your hand. My wife's there. We've talked about that in the Torah study a lot. That's a little fairly undertold story. I mean, this whole thing comes from a screeching halt that Moses does, right? I mean, one of the things that you see in the Torah is that we need to keep the main people alive. And this brings us to this. I don't want to talk about this too much this morning because this is a whole other class. But what happens here leaves a lot of questions. I mean, it's just, there's a lot of things that don't make sense. And the oral law, what the oral law is the oral law is all of the commentary through the years by rabbis and sages. Where's my book? What are you doing? Reading. So, this, well, here's what Jews don't get, and it's, makes me homicide. This book is totally incomplete. It's worthless without this. I mean, they're like Auburn now. They're I know I'm overusing that. There's no way to separate the oral law from the written law. The only issue here is that Reformed Jews don't study the oral law the way they should, the way I want them to. You can't get through one page of Torah without reading the commentary that's on the bottom and have any idea what you're doing. I mean, first of all, people are not trained to read the Torah. That's a whole other problem. I mean, there is a way that you're supposed to do it, and that can be taught. But it's not very often. And so what happens is people get this is a tangent. People get together in Torah study classes all over this country in Reformed synagogues on Saturday mornings, and they just read the book. Do you like to be read to? Okay. Me either.
So it says it's oral law, but really it's written now, and the oral law is the commentary at the bottom. Is that what you're saying?
Right.
And it's all these different rabbis and the people who have commented and some.
Well, that's all I've said so far. But again, if we do this again, I mean, all of the things we're talking about have classes all their own. I mean, this is what I'm showing you here is probably 10 classes. So I'm planning on coming back, and I hope there's more coffee. And maybe bagels next time. That's not an offer prize. Was there a hand? Yeah.
There's some Christians that would believe that every word of the Bible from cover to cover is absolutely true and is absolutely the Word of God. And you're emphasizing the importance of the oral tradition here. Is there a general belief among Jewish people that it is truly an oral tradition, or are there some that truly believe that it's absolutely?
Well, that's the whole point of what separates Reform from conservative to Orthodox. I mean, clearly the Orthodox do. Their whole faith is built around the literalness of the Bible, which, if you stop and think about it for a second, there's only two belief systems here. One is that God's word was spoken directly to Moses on Mount Sinai, and so, where's my book? Every word in the Torah comes from God. And so, of course, we're going to try the best we can to observe all 613 commandments. We're not going to eat pork. We're not going to eat shellfish. We're not going to do any of that stuff. We're not going to work on the Sabbath. Well, that's Reform. And this is a whole nother, we could do a class just on the Sabbath, right? I mean, here's the most important day in the entire Jewish tradition. Probably one of the most important aspects of being a Jew is how you observe the Sabbath, right? Everybody knows when the Sabbath is for us. Friday, sundown to Saturday. Man, it doesn't get any more important than that.